Hello, again. It's me, your friend, and I've come to give you information about a mask that is interesting to me. If you don't find it interesting, that's fine. I didn't particularly ask for your opinion about my life choices. It's not this one, by the way, because I don't like this one. But it is something of incredible rarity, or at least, I don't know, maybe it's not rare, maybe there's just not enough interest in them for them to be particularly valuable. Which is son of a tit. Alright, it is the KTM, or a KTM more accurately, except this one has been converted for use in a riot control situation. And the important factor in that is that it does not have a long hose, or roughly a 10 to 12 inch hose leading to a chest filter, but instead it has this nice can filter which weighs enough that if you put it on a stick, it could probably do some serious damage to someone's head. Not that I would, this is just a theoretical statement because this bitch is heavy. Let me unscrew this here for a sec so I can continue my discussion. It is rather finely threaded. I feel like a maitre d' or a garçon, I guess, unscrewing a wine bottle. Anyway, it's got this nice filter. It's fairly hefty. I'd say it's probably at least a pound or two, if not more. It's fairly dense. It's got this nice mesh on the bottom. Got these nice screws here, where you can unscrew it if you so choose, so you can replace the ingredients. Although I don't know if anyone actually did that. These aren't really documented. There's 2 examples of them. There's a couple photos, but there's not really a lot of information. However, there are good photos, like a guard at Sing Sing Prison in New York wearing one of these and loading a riot control tear gas gun. And so, logically speaking, one can only make so many assumptions about what could possibly be used for this before they reach the logical conclusion that, yeah, this is a tear gas mask. That said, we don't exactly know who produced these masks, or more accurately, retrofitted them. The actual production and retrofitting of industrial masks, particularly near the first half of the 20th century, like 1918 and slightly afterwards, is rather hard to discern because there's not really a lot of documentation. In fact, I don't actually know who made this face piece. It could have been MSA, it could have been the Bureau of Mines, it could have been the Chemical Warfare Service of the United States through various smaller companies. But that's not really super important. We're talking about this mask right now. Once we get concrete answers, you bet your dumb ass I'm going to make about 3 or 4 different videos on that. Many of them will involve screaming, swearing, and me maybe trying to chuck myself out of a window as I struggle to comprehend the Eldritchian horror that is American industrial masks. But we're not talking about that, are we? We're talking about this little number here. So let's get on with it. Now, if we look at the filter, we notice, maybe if you can see it, that it has very fine threads. These are actually some of the finest threads that I've seen on a gas mask ever. Including even, actually, if you'll bear with me for a second, including several modern industrial masks. For instance, this filter here, which is very nice, was produced in the 70s. You'll see the threads aren't really as fine as this one. Make whatever jokes you want. In fact, let me... Where is it? There it is. Actually, I have a bag of North mask filters here. You can see these are very crude threads, just like North itself, a very crude and unintelligent company that I'm really not a fan of, because producing modern panoramics doesn't exactly earn respect in my eyes. Whoop-de-doo, you made a face piece out of plastic. I could do that with a fucking blow dryer and a goddamn fucking Walmart bag. The Viet Cong made friggin' panoramic masks out of shopping bags. They literally sewed a coffee filter into them. You made a panoramic. Good job, anyone can do that. But we're not talking about that, we're talking about this mask. So moving forward from that, we have our very nice, very fine threads on this, and we have our very nice, very fine filter with very nice, very fine mesh on the bottom. Now, moving on to the actual mask itself, which is, I'll admit, not in the greatest of conditions, but it is in condition, which is good, because that means it exists. My ability to actually judge this mask is based entirely on the fact that the mask exists, which, considering it's probably about 100 years old at this point, ain't bad. Because really, when you think about it, it's outlived a decent bunch of humans that were probably born the same time. You can't really judge a 100-year-old human at this point, at least probably the mass majority of them, because they're passed away. So the fact that I can exercise judgment on it is something meaningful. Anyway, let's get on to it. It's a fairly decent KTM face piece, and I don't really... We're still working out who made certain KTMs, and it's rather hard to tell because while the Chemical Warfare Service did produce a lot of them, MSA has been documented as producing a whole lot more of them. So it's hard to tell if a face piece is a wartime face piece or a regular one. But don't worry about that. We're not thinking about that. We're thinking about this face piece. And you see, again, the key thing for this face piece is that this is actually threaded. Now, normally you would have a straight shank hose going to a straight shank filter. An example of which I actually have right here in this very nice, very fancy Burrell diaphragm, which is kind of based off of this, more or less. And you see we have a tube. It's a nice rubber tube. This is a rubber tube too. None of this is threaded. And then you take a nice little hose clamp and you clamp it on to something like this, which is usually for ammonia. And you see it's straight shank. And they're usually for ammonia because they're used for refrigeration purposes. Because ammonia is very toxic and kind of flammable. Actually pretty flammable. So actually we don't use it for refrigerant anymore. Except they're actually switching back to it because they found out that chlorofluorocarbons and hydrochlorofluorocarbons are still bad for the ozone. But ammonia, being a natural compound, you can find it in your pee, is in fact not harmful for the environment. So we're actually willing to risk human life and limb to save whatever animals you want to choose. I'm not going to name them. You probably already named them by now. But you know what? Pandas ain't worth it, y'all. Pandas ain't worth it. There's some other stuff that's worth it, like maybe us not having global climate change that makes the Statue of Liberty freeze over and then fall over and kill someone's grandma. That ain't cool. Anyway, back onto this. Fairly nice face piece. This one's in decent condition, and I'm actually pretty happy to have it. It's kind of weird that it has this chin seam here, which is a tan color, since that's unusual for them. But otherwise, it's a fairly run-of-the-mill face piece, and it's in fairly good condition. The flapper valve's in decent shape. I don't know exactly what did this, considering that there's not a lot of animals that eat rubber. I know there's been some rats that eat through plastic and OM10 gas masks so they can make nests, but rubber, that's kind of weird, you gotta admit. Like, you know, if there's any rats viewing this, not furry rats, but like actual rats who have achieved who are sentient, if you're a sentient rat and you like to explain why a rat might do this, I'd really love that information. That'd be pretty good for me. Otherwise, I don't really know an awful lot, other than it's just a nice KTM face piece that's been threaded rather well, rather finely, and a nice filter that's been threaded rather well and rather finely. So those are probably a fairly expensive setup when it was originally made. It's still an expensive setup, actually, and I paid a decent chunk of money for this that I'm not willing to disclose in this video. Anyway, yeah, that's the lowdown. If I was a different YouTuber, maybe with like more time or a video editing software, I'd probably put in some like historical photos, but I'm not, so I'm not going to. If you really want them, feel free to like shoot me an email or something. I have a website, gasmaskbunker.com, no spaces, spelled exactly as you think it is. If you want to go on there and email me for more info, you know, feel free. I like giving info out to people. That's less work for me, assuming they memorize it correctly and tell other people it properly. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And last video I was kind of joking. If you want to like and subscribe, you know, feel free. You know, it makes me feel good about myself that people are paying attention to these ramblings. If you don't want to like and subscribe, that's cool. Just don't be a dick about it. Alright, well, thanks for watching.